For my end-of-term research paper or presentation, I decided to research the critical period hypothesis. The critical period hypothesis was created by Eric Lenneberg in 1967. It is a hypothesis that states there is a biological time that is most appropriate and most efficient to acquire or learn a second language. An exact definition would be a biologically determined period of life when language can be acquired more easily and beyond which time language is increasingly difficult to acquire. There is much evidence to back up both sides, one being that a second language is best acquired when the person is younger, and the opposing side is that a second language is better acquired as an adult. Eric Lenneberg leans towards the side that language is better acquired at a younger age, mostly before puberty. There are different factors that play into this decision in research as well as the opposing side. There are neurological factors to prove both sides of the argument. Children's neurological factors are that by the time puberty hits, the brain is completely lateralized. This means that all jobs have been assigned to each side of the brain, making it harder to learn a second language after this point because the left hemisphere is what would hold all of the language information. Something else that happens to the brain before the age of 15 is equilibration. Once the brain reaches this, everything is done in an orderly fashion, making it harder to learn new things, such as language. It is better to learn language before the brain reaches equilibrium, because there is more room for language learning. On the other hand, adults' brains have already reached both equilibration and lateralization, but that doesn't mean they can't learn language at all. The right hemisphere of the brain holds language information that is formed during early stages of language learning. So, although the right hemisphere might be harder to reach, using visual cues in a classroom can help adults learn language easier using their right hemispheres. Cognitive factors with children versus adults. The main thing is formal operational thought, which is something brought on by Jean Piaget. He stated that between the ages of 11 and 16, you reach the stage where you can think more abstractly, be able to process material in different ways than before, and create ways of learning for yourself. Before you reach this stage as a child, there is evidence that states this is easier when children don't have formal operational thought because everything is clearer to them, and they don't have the abstract thinking in their way. As for adults, formal operational thought benefits you highly when learning a second language. This is because you are able to process the material differently and think more abstractly about what you are learning. Everyone creates their own ego, and as they progress socially and emotionally, they get to know themselves better as a whole. Separate from that, there is something called a language ego, which is brought on by the language you speak, and the cultural aspects of that language create an identity based on the language. Children create these egos, and because they aren't as far along, a second language identity wouldn't affect a child like it would an adult. An adult might be more affected emotionally by a second language identity because moving on from one to another can create emotions that adults may have a harder time overcoming. Along with that, you have peer pressure. When it comes to peer pressure, it is more widely known and a bigger issue in children's classrooms such as elementary school, middle school, and high school. Some children don't take well to peer pressure and will just do what they think is best and what they think their classmates or friends would want them to do. When it comes to adults, they respond better to peer pressure and it might not affect them as much. There isn't much to back up children having the upper hand when it comes to linguistic factors in second language acquisition, aside from the sequence in which they learn a language. There is a specific order of acquisition that children are taught language for them to learn it the easiest. If you stick to the same sequence with a second language, the children will learn it easier. Adults can comprehend skills and passages better than children can. Due to the extra experience they have in the past with comprehension skills, overall adults will comprehend quicker and more efficiently than children. And although this information might contradict itself, because before we said that adults' pronunciation might be off due to their accents, overall, adults have better pronunciation of second language than children will. There was also information given on first and second language interference, which doesn't really affect children or adults because first and second language interference would be the same for children and adults based on research and evidence given. That is one of the things that people worry about when learning a second language when they're already fluent in another. You get worried that what you know from your prior language will interfere with your second language, but this has been shown to not be a problem with second language acquisition in children or adults. Overall, like a lot of different things in life, there are two sides to every story, and this is a perfect example of it. Although the critical period hypothesis has a lot of information to back up both sides, those sides being children learning a second language are easier than adults and an adult learning a language easier than a child, there is still not really one side that wins it all. Here are references if you would like to look where I got most of my information from. Thank you for listening.